Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. We are officially live, session 94 of Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Somehow 94 rescheduled. Got a couple amazing guests, a couple former guests on here, but a couple of great human beings that I've got to know over the last little while. They know each other for a lot longer than I have known them, but we're going to talk preparation. We're going to talk movement. We're going to talk a lot of things. Before we do that, our sponsors, as always, brought to you by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Benchmark Athletics, and Epic, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. As always, we are honored and grateful to have an audience, to have guests, to have this platform to connect people, reconnect people in this case, and we go from there. Two amazing guests, as mentioned. Session 48, primary guest, Tim Kontos from Virginia Commonwealth University. He has spent over 23 years at VCU and is now charged with duties as the Associate Athletic Director of Sport Performance and Student Athlete Wellness. He provides leadership in overseeing sports performance, sports medicine, sports nutrition, sports psychology within the Rams Athletics Department. No stranger on the other side, Ryan Metzger from Clemson University. She was the primary guest, session 67 of this podcast, and I'll encourage you to go back and listen to those individual conversations as well. She's in her second year as a senior assistant of Olympic sports strength and conditioning at Clemson University. She is directly responsible for the strength and conditioning efforts of softball and women's soccer, as well as having direct oversight of all volunteer interns. And that is where we shall begin. Both of you, thank you for being here, Tim and Ryan. And I want to start with the fact that you both have oversight of other human beings. And I think this is where you met or originally knew each other. So Metz, we'll start with you and how you know Tim, how you got to know Tim, and where things stand, on different sides of the country at this point. Well, I guess same sides of the country, different states. And then Tim, over to you and your relationship with Ryan.
Yeah, hi. Well, thank you for having me on again. This is awesome.
Appreciate you being here.
And I get to be on here with Coach Kontos. As you mentioned, we have a connection that goes back, I don't know, like 5 years or so. I think we met in 2015, which was when I first got hired at Virginia Commonwealth University, my first ever full-time position as a strength and conditioning coach. Coach Kontos, talked about it before, took a chance on me. I was a young coach coming up in my graduate assistant position, just looking to get my foot in the door. And, he gave me the opportunity. And I had no idea how awesome of an opportunity I got to walk into, being a part of that program, and having Coach Kontos as not only my boss, but mentor, and I really look up to, and has had a positive influence in my life. So long story on how we met, but I'm very, very grateful for that.
Amazing. And it comes through. Definitely. Tim, over to you, man, and your first memories of Ryan, or how you came to this incredibly insightful hire.
Well, first, let me say thank you for having me on, and it's pretty cool to see your sponsor list have grown substantially since the last time I was on. You're coming up on 100 episodes. That's pretty wild. That's awesome. But I don't know, how embarrassing do I want to get, Mets, with this? But we'll just say Mets was a little unrefined in the interview process, but did well enough that one of the things as you get older, you have probably a more difficult time articulating, identifying the it factor. And Metz is one of those individuals that has a lot of passion for what she does. And that's something that comes out when you talk with her. And sometimes people just can't pick up on it. So did I think I was taking a chance? No, I knew I was getting a solid human being and I was going to get a quality individual. So it's been very exciting to see her growth, and then also to come around and for us to stay in contact and still be able to feed off of one another and go from being of a position where I was kind of a mentor to now I'm going to her for advice on particular situations. And so it's pretty cool how things kind of come full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love the capture from both of you, and our audience, as this gets published and put out onto the podcast, won't see that, but a true connection. And I love the fact that it's sort of come full circle. And Tim, maybe you and I are a little closer in age, perhaps at this point, but you start to backtrack and you start to see students enter the workplace, and then you start to see how having a younger mentor really adds value to what we do, because it keeps you relevant. It keeps you understanding, what's coming out. It helps with all those other pieces maybe. And then Ryan, yes, having somebody that you started out with to always turn to for like that sage sound advice that may or may not be quote unquote current, but it's completely relevant and it's all coming from experience. And so on both sides of the coin, I think, I'm toying with the idea, Tim, thanks for pointing out that we are coming up to session 100, and it's going to be a special episode with a few different guests. And the mentorship piece is massive, because that's what keeps things going. That's what drives passion. And I think maybe reignites passion in some of us that are a little bit older, because we can turn and see it and remember ourselves in those shoes, or remember ourselves not being quite as refined, or maybe we were really refined and then we stepped outside of that box a little bit now, to sort of recreate ourselves or continue to evolve ourselves. So not where we're going to go this evening, but I would love to come back around to the importance of that. Perhaps down the road, sure, we do another segment, but this one, when we initially talked, I wanted to pick your brains, because two amazing schools. The blast that we put out there originally was a split picture of both of you doing some crazy thing and holding some crazy championships. So Metz, I'll throw it over to you and just reviewing what that championship was for you at Clemson, and then Tim, back to you for that championship, and then we'll transition to sort of preparation and movement and all these other pieces. But yeah, Ryan, to you with that, I think it was a plaque or a trophy that you were holding and doing the thing, celebrating.
Yeah, I just have to say that I loved the side-by-side promo that you put together, because we think back to a conversation that you and I had about myself and Coach Kontos, and I had said something to you and you were like, that's a Kontosism, like tree, apple. And it just reminded me of that. It's like we have the same facial expression and everything. Mm-hmm. And photos. That was hilarious.
Absolutely. I'm happy you remember that, because I thought it was a great capture. It was essentially the same pose. It was amazing. But yeah, continue. Great stuff.
Yeah. So for me on my end, that was our ACC regular season championship for softball. Softball is a brand new sport at Clemson. They had started their first season in the spring of 2020. It got cut short because of COVID. So we didn't have a full season. We came back around in 2021. That was our first full season, and we ended up winning the regular season championship for the ACC, made it to the Alabama regional, actually made it to the championship game of the regional, and Alabama just happened to slip away a little bit, but a really, really exciting run for a brand new team.
Absolutely. And I think, as a strength coach, as somebody in the performance space or the therapeutic space, like being on field and being able to celebrate that with the athletes and show, your passion and your emotion. Like, I love the capture. It's just beautiful. And I think sometimes we're so behind the scenes that we don't necessarily get exposed to that. Right. And then the championship that you were obviously involved with that process and helping in that environment to get them to that point. Tim, to you, and you were holding, doing the same thing, posing it down. I don't know if you broke that thing or what, but go for it.
No, they build them pretty sturdy, so that's a good thing. So with me, I've been at VCU, as you said, almost 24 years, and I've worked with baseball for probably about 17 or 18 of those. Mm-hmm. And as you listed my responsibilities at the beginning, I've got a lot of responsibilities. And last year, my main team responsibilities were baseball and volleyball, plus overseeing multiple departments. It was getting more and more difficult to be able to do. Well, for me, I'm a type A type personality. I want to be able to do the best job at everything all the time. And with all those responsibilities, I simply couldn't. So I talked with my supervisor about reducing my team responsibilities and handing off baseball onto one of my assistants. And so last year was the last year that I worked with baseball. And after having gone through the year with COVID, numerous quarantines, and the team made it through, we ended up hosting A10 championships here in Richmond, which is the first time. I think that's the first time we've ever done it. And they won the whole thing. And so for that to happen, then for me to be able to go out like that was really, really special. It was really awesome.
Amazing. And I didn't even really realize it, but I do now that you've mentioned it, both of you. So a first year team, a first year program, and Coach Kontos' last year with baseball. Mm-hmm. What the dichotomy there, and just what a capture of exactly how, we started out here, taking chances and rolling the dice and being early in your career and perhaps a little later in your career and being able to experience that. And nonetheless, the flex off. I'm not sure who won that one. Maybe that'll be the next post should be who won this flex off. Mets, maybe that could be one of yours and throw that up there. But you captured exactly where I kind of want to take this as well. And so it's a great segue over that way. Following COVID, both of you touched on that, coming out of COVID, canceled seasons, or, at least just coming off and coming back from that. That's directly where I want to go in terms of like preparation. So when we throw that word out there, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When you hear that and you're thinking, whatever you're thinking, like take it wherever you want to go, preparation for a singular game, preparation for a season, preparation for like wherever you want to take it, just give us a context. And Tim, where do you take that word? When you think preparation, where does your mind go immediately? And what are sort of some of the things that you're thinking about or that creates that definition in your mind?
So the obviously the first thing that's going to come to mind is we'll start the workout with we'll talk to the student athletes about what the workout's going to be, what we're going to do in it, and then go into mobility and warm up, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty standard, but an idea that I had borrowed from you. I won't say stolen, but borrowed from you, and also my wife, who's a yoga instructor, was setting an intention for the session. Mm-hmm. And so talking about it with the student athletes ahead of time, here's our workout. This is what our main focus is. What do you want to get out of it? And sometimes it takes a little bit of explaining to the athletes. Okay, you want to work on your vertical leap? We have cleans tomorrow. That's a great, explosive, powerful movement. You need work on your serve. You need some upper body strength. Okay, well, we got dumbbell presses tomorrow. What's your main focus? Now, it doesn't mean that another movement is going to be left off the docket or we're not going to pay attention to it, but that's going to be your primary focus. And that should start well in advance. Now, one of the things with that is knowing your audience and knowing what your athletes do. I don't want to say, well, I would say appreciate. Some of them, they simply don't, if it's a running workout, they just want to find out what it is when they get there. Mm-hmm. As opposed to having the intention of, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I've got 400s. These are the times I want to get, and this is how I want to do it. And this is how I want to keep my team up, et cetera, et cetera. But starting well in advance of what we traditionally, using air quotes there, what we traditionally think of So getting your mind right, that's the beginning of preparation before we get the body going.
Yeah, no, beautiful. It's a great capture on so many levels. We'll come back to a couple of those points for sure. Ryan, over to you. That word, where does that take you?
Yeah, preparation for me just means putting in work that you're risking not knowing if it's going to pay off. Because you usually have a goal in mind, whether it's a game, a season, a championship, whatever it is. So the way that you prepare into that game, obviously, is what we're talking about, and all of that work that you put in, but there's a very high chance that it's not going to pay off, but you still do the work. So that's kind of what that means to me. But from Kontos's point, it sounds like he sets the intention before the lift or before the training session. And I remember specifically with softball, a lot of them had come a year prior to them even playing a game ever. So that's all they were doing was preparing with this like goal in mind. When we finally got to the spot where we were playing games and we were having these great winning streaks and going on these sweeps, I used to talk to them at the end of stuff and celebrate the victory, but also put into perspective what this new win means moving forward and how much work and effort we need to put in to continue on that level. So I would kind of hit that from the back end.
Yeah, I think these are both amazing captures. And when I look at it and I put on a different hat, perhaps I put on sort of the therapist or the sport medicine side of things, or like the paramedical side. And I say like, man, what's preparation? Like, what is that? It's getting, primed for the thing that you're trying to do. So I think those are things that are there. But when I flip that and I look to sort of the S&C coaches and the advanced level thinkers like both of you are, and in the spaces that you're in, all of the lifts are preparatory in nature. They are progressive. They are not reactive for the most part. Like you're utilizing those segments of the day or those portions of those athletes' lives or schedules to create success, whether that's in that room at that moment or the championship that you both have been a part of. The lifting side, the strength and conditioning side, like how can we transition, or can we, or are we already, how can we do a better job utilizing sort of the therapeutic side, or how do you guys integrate with the therapeutic side of things so that it's less reactive and it's more a part of getting ahead of the game in preparation of, or in preparation for? And I don't want to lead you anywhere, but my mind goes immediately to, okay, we're looking at last year and we had 6 bouts of rotator cuff tendonitis. Okay, so like, are we doing anything different? What are we not doing? What can we add? What can we take away? Were they, were these the hard workers or the not so hard workers? So getting ahead from a proactive standpoint, always in my mind, the S&C coaches that are really doing a great job and continue to lead the field are very forward thinking when it comes to these things. You understand a whole lot more than just reps, sets, and this is what you're doing for this segment of the lift. It has a purpose beyond. So I don't know where you want to take that, or if you want to take that, Tim. How do we move in that direction, or are we already moving in that direction?
Yeah, I think we are moving in the direction, and I think that's kind of I'd like to think of our profession is, what was the word that you used?
Progressive.
Progressive rather than
proactive.
Reactive. Yeah, because we're in the game of injury prevention. And now I'll tell, like when I have recruits on campus, I'll tell them performance enhancement is a very close second, but I can't enhance your performance if you're not on the court. And so putting things in place, just like you're talking about at the end of it, at the end of last year, sitting down with the athletic trainer and saying, okay, what are the injuries we had? What were the non-contact? What are the things that we can try and prevent, overuse injuries, et cetera, then also sitting down with the coach and saying, what do we need? Where do we fall off this year? As for instance, last year, conditioning during the volleyball season took a back seat. And towards the end of the year, that was one of the things our coaches picked up on. And so we have kind of come back around and made sure that this year that maintains a focus this year.
Right.
So yeah, it's, putting all those things into place all the time, and it's a fluid thing. Just like what Metz was talking about, I thought that was a great perspective, that you don't know if it's going to work. And that'll kind of lead into like one of my later points, but you're putting something in place, and you're like, wow, this is having the exact opposite effect of what I thought it was going to have. The girls their legs are heavier going into the game, as opposed to the exact opposite. Whereas, I thought they'd feel fresh and light. So got to take the feedback, and taking everything with a grain of salt, knowing who to go to for feedback, who to take with a grain of salt when they provide their feedback. But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, great stuff. And Ryan, same thing to you in terms of the integrative space, or are we doing a good enough job, or where can we perhaps spend a little bit more time?
I think, our role in athletic performance is so important. And the other bit of it is that it's important to collaborate with all of the other pieces that go into the athletic performance of an athlete, because if you silo yourself, at the end of the day, the only person that it really affects is the athlete and the athlete performance. So for me, I've had a really great working relationship with the athletic training staff and sports medicine here. They actually attend all of the lifting sessions, which is great for me because it's a resource, but also it's great for another perspective, so that they can also see what is going on. And if feel the need to give any kind of insight or, whatever, they're free to do that. But at the same time, I just keep a lot of transparency in what I do. I talk to them ahead of time. They give me insight and input in the lift or the conditioning session. And so I just think it's really important to have that. But like Coach Kontos mentioned, he kind of alluded to, experimentation, and two really big things that we push in our philosophy at Clemson is innovation. So you're constantly researching and reading, and what's something new that we can implement? How's something that we can, where's this thing that we can change? We don't want the lifts to fail for these athletes year after year after year. We don't want to change just dates and keep going because we have a different team every year. But also the other part of it is experimentation. So we need to see what works and what doesn't. What can we put in? What should we take out? The only way you're going to know is if you try it. So that's kind of been my approach to, athletic performance and utilizing our sports medicine department as well as a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And innovation, experimentation, and this is the art and the science sort of blended into one, right? We do all the research, we have all the research, and then we can do a little bit more to disprove or or confound that current research, or whatever the case, or apply our setting and or the inverse, and change all of that. But both of you touched on this in terms of preparation in different ways. I'll take it back, Tim, to setting intention, and I look at that as communicating and having that opportunity to communicate with the athletes and deliver information that is clear, concise, and understandable in whatever realm or way an athlete takes it. And then, Ryan, to your point, you talked about communicating with the athletes. We want to continue these winning ways. So continuing the success looks like all of that hard work we did, and then modifying that so that we can then continue on this path. Whether we get there or not is irrelevant, but both of you captured the importance of clarity in communication. And I think all of that we can take a step even further back and look at that as part of preparation as well. Understanding that communication channels are closed, loops are closed, but they're also accessible. So your sports medicine staff can access what you're doing. And I have been one to spend time on a gym floor as often as possible and be outside of the clinic more often than not to watch athletes move, because to me, that's gathering information. If I can watch an athlete through a whole day, it gets a little creepy. But I mean, if you see them move in a gym when they're not hurt, you're going to have a whole lot more detail if and when they do get hurt, or have some contribution as to how or why they're moving differently now. And so, but both of you talked to that. And I think the preparation piece leads quite nicely into sort of some of the things that you talked on, and lifts and intention. And if you want to get better at this, here's a really great opportunity to do that. When it comes to lifts, and there's a lot out there, social media, there's a lot of things out there that get current and trendy and all these other things. And we can buy in or not, we can agree or disagree. And I think that's great. I think access to information is also great, but again, with a grain of salt, with some understanding, with some education. When it comes to lifts, is there one best lift? Or is there one lift that everybody should be doing? Or is this more tailored to, this is the lift that you should be doing based on you and the things that you need? Ryan, let's start with you, and then Tim, will throw it back to you this way. We'll just bounce it back and forth.
I think as I've grown in this field and gotten more experience, my answer probably has changed. So before I was at VCU, I was at Kentucky. Kentucky is a very Olympic-based program. And so I thought that that was the only way that you could train an athlete. And so you make the athlete kind of fit the mold of that. And I never wanted to get away from that because that was what I was comfortable with. That's what I knew. I understood like how it transferred. I understood why it made sense, but also at the same time, I think maybe I failed to understand how that's probably not the best for every single person that walks in the door. So as I've learned more about training and things like that, I would say that there's not one set lift perfect for every person, because every person you meet is going to be different from so many different, anatomy and all of that. Like just, there's so many different factors that go into it. So now I would say that you can have an idea or a template or a thought process, and then you pick the movement that best suits that person. So
absolutely. Mm-hmm. Tim, how about you? Obviously nodding in agreement, but anything to add or anything that to counter or whatever?
Yeah, I wish I could have been as open-minded as Metz, where she is in her career, where I was back then, because this is something I'm putting more and more thought into, especially this past year. And I think the big thing for me is seeing my assistant take over baseball and doing different movements with them compared to what I would do. And, just kind of asking him why, asking myself why, and saying, okay, maybe, for me, a year ago, my number one unequivocal answer would have been a squat. Squat is going to help just about everything. Mm-hmm. I still feel pretty strongly about that, but now I'm deviating a little bit more towards different variations of a squat, whether it's a split squat with dumbbells, a front squat, looking at different loading patterns and the mechanics of the sport, as you pointed out. Sports that have a tremendous amount of rotation probably aren't going to do well with a ton of spinal loading, i.e. baseball. So having a different movement in your repertoire that you can fall back on is going to be more applicable for them and safer, and probably get the job done just as well.
Yeah. And I think there's so much wisdom in being able to reflect and assess sort of where we're at and why we think what we think and how we quote unquote know what we know. And to your point, Ryan, like our output or our life is based on our own experiences. And therefore, like if we take that a step further, like we only know what we know, and therefore we don't know what we don't know. And so we sometimes do get caught in gutters, and not to say that that's a gutter in a negative sense or a downstream or whatever. And we either can't get out of it, or the walls are too high, we don't see outside of it, or it's working really, really well. So like, why would I change anything? And there are values to all of those things, I think, in my own experience. And then again, like both of you take this point and you make a good point on your side, and you make a good point on your stance, and you make a good point on your experience. And we have, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Stu McGill, but he's like sort of this bag guru, and his answer to virtually every question is it depends, right? And so both of you did that in your own way. Yeah, maybe it depends. Like, okay, how do I fix the athlete that can't squat and they need to be able to squat for what they do, but they don't do it well. It depends, right? It depends on femur length. It depends on kinesthetic awareness. It depends on range of motion. It depends on where they're loading the bar and what their past experiences with squat, so on and so forth. And so it really does depend. And I think if there's one lesson that maybe we can all take away from this conversation to date is, well, there's plenty, but I mean, at least that most recent one is that it truly does. It does depend, but there are some really great movements and some great pieces too that fall in line with preparation and that fall in line with best movement. We'll transition off of that one and just get to one more question. It's relatively late based on your guys' hours and what you're doing every day, all day. So we'll keep this one relatively brief, but untapped or underutilized elements in programming specific for your collegiate athletes. Is there something that you've seen sort of uniformly or you picked up on over time that, I wonder if we're the only ones doing this, or what they're doing looks really good. We should find out what they're doing so that we talk amongst each other. Tim, anything untapped or you mentioned intention and setting intention. I think that's massive as well, because there's a lot of potential left on the table when we don't really lean into what we're doing. But if I took your answer, expand. If not, go ahead.
I would say giving the athletes a choice. And now we're not the only ones doing that, but that's something that not too many people are doing too often. And this goes back to Metz's point where we're putting a plan in place. Hopefully we're putting some research behind it to say previous people have done this and it's worked. So hopefully it's going to work for us, but we have a plan. We're trying to put it in place. Now, if I let the athlete meddle in that by giving them a choice, it's going to throw my path off a little bit. Now, but there is something very powerful about having the athlete make the choice. Once they've made that choice, they will work infinitely harder at it. And I think that's something that, I'll probably put up a couple options tomorrow in tomorrow's volleyball workout.
There you go. I think it's brilliant, man. Absolutely. And it gives the autonomy, right? Like it provides the athlete with making the decision. Okay, you have an option here. You're either going to go, I don't know, whatever the example is, like a barbell squat, or are you going to go split stance, whatever it is, and whatever the relevance is in your lift and in your thing. I think that's absolutely terrific. And I think more people need to hear that and understand that there's certainly value to that. Whereas rigid programming, there's also value there, but great point. Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say giving, your athletes a choice allows ownership and creates better buy-in because they feel like they had input. So I give my athletes a choice as well. Sometimes I don't. I'm like, this is what you're doing. But it's based on training age. So that's what that comes from.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. I actually, because I thought about that today with softball. Freshmen are doing this, upperclassmen are doing this. But as far as like actual ways to train and things that are being implemented, 3 things came to mind. So like fascial sling work for our rotational sports has been pretty huge with our program. So we do a lot of rotational movement patterns, especially with our rotational sports. That's been really interesting. I myself have utilized a lot more landmine work. It's been something that I haven't done a ton in the past. I have found different kind of squat variations or split squat variations. I found a way to make it a rotational power movement for my softball athletes. I really like that. And then I think the latest, if you follow any of the Clemson social media, you will probably see this. We have taken a pretty deep dive into locomotion through like Bob Stroop. And so a lot of like hip shifting and just footwork. And it's a really, really good way to look at movement patterns, especially after a game. So how have they recovered? But it's also a way to help them be a little bit more athletic in their playing. So that's main things.
Yeah, no, some great stuff. And all of these pieces are in the best interest of those that you're working with. And I think this is it, like choice, opportunity, planned, executed work is also very valuable. And then, yeah, you talk landmine, or you talk, fascial slings, or you want to talk, however, kinetic chains, whatever language people are using to describe this stuff, accessing all of this stuff, because we know there is no direct correlation between what you do on the gym floor and what there is on the field. Why? Because that environment is ever changing in a competitive space, unless it's a weightlifter, right? Like, unless it's an Olympic lifter, then you have a pretty predictable environment. You can train directly based on the movement because you're training for that movement. So I think it's great that we are now becoming completely aware that movement matters, that dynamic nature of movement is important, and that changing angles on things is critical. Like, if we look at, I'll talk to my bias just from a therapeutic standpoint, like, I'm implementing a lot of undoing. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, we figure out the patterns that athletes are using, and then undoing those, and that's rehab, because we're getting so bound into some of these rotational patterns that we can't actually anti-rotate. And if you can't anti-rotate to the thing that you're rotating, eventually there's going to be a breakdown. It's going to be really, really hard to interrupt or recreate that rotational pattern. And we could take this a step further and take it into all kinds of different talks, but we won't go there tonight. But if you look at an athlete who rotates one direction, and then you sit them down and have them do a rotational orthopedic test, generally speaking, they rotate better in the opposite direction. I mean, that's what I've found anecdotally. And it's just a kind of a cool test. If you sit down your right-handed pitchers and get them to do an orthopedic, like thoracic rotation, and then get them to do it the opposite way, I don't know, or hockey players or soccer kickers, like, it's an interesting sort of test. And I think for me, like, taking some of those, even if that's incorrect in your setting, like, that's fine. I'm cool with that. I'm not saying that's a blanket statement, but anecdotally, like, looking at some of those things that aren't necessarily looked at all the time, and just taking like let's step back from this, and like, if we keep training them to be better at kicking one direction, are we doing them a disservice to the pieces that we're leaving out, right? And so that off-field stuff, and that's where I think, like, preparation, that first talk that we discussed, it has so many different facets and so many different angles. And anyway, I could take this, we could all take this, I'm sure, much longer than we need to. But Tim,
well, if I may, I was going to say, I think that's a very difficult concept for a lot of sport coaches to comprehend. Like, if they were to come into the weight session and they would look at the workout, probably about 75% of it is trying to counteract everything that they're doing on the court of the field. Right. It's preventative in nature. We're trying to why are you working their tibialis? They don't vertical leap with their tibialis anterior. Yes, but it's a major shock absorber. And so it's going to help prevent shin splints when they're doing endless sprints up and down the court. Why volleyball players doing that? I don't know. But I digress. But that's something that's very important. And I think a lot of athletes, they don't understand it as well, but it's probably something that comes out more so when we're dealing with sport coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. And I think we could probably sit down and hunker down on a few of these points, but again, it's a Monday night. I appreciate you guys taking this extra bit of time. I know long days and they start early, and Ryan will try and work some more days off into your contract. Tim, you too. I don't know if you need an agent, it's not me, but maybe we need agents for strength coaches moving forward too.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. So follow some of your advice. Make sure you get lots of good rest, and where and when you can find it. As we used to say in baseball, make sure you sleep fast and get back after it. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I appreciate you sharing your stories and insights, and as always, the connection here between the two of you, and bringing me in to sort of start to begin these conversations and have a few more, and really get exposed to some amazing human beings on the other side, outside of being strength coaches. You both influenced me in any number of levels to this point. I look forward to where things can go into the future and future conversations. And as always, you're welcome on here anytime and every time if we can make it happen. It's Tim Kontos from Virginia Commonwealth University and Ryan Metzger from Clemson University. Remember to check out their previous sessions as well. Tim was session 48. Ryan was session 67. Those were their individuals. This was a combined effort, talking all the things. Really appreciate this, guys. I'll let you close this out with a good night. Thank you for everybody for picking this up. It's session 94. First Start, Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Tim Kontos, Ryan Metzger. Session 95 will go next week. You guys take this one away. Thank you and good night.
It was great seeing both of your faces. Thank you so much for having us on, James.
Yeah, I second that. I was wondering if Coach Kontos had his beard grown back yet, but thank you so much for having us on. This was a lot of fun.
Back and better than ever. Thank you guys so much, and good luck through the rest of this week and beyond. We'll be in touch. All right. Good night.
Take care.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.